Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this Friday. I'm Greg Swartz. I'm the big man half of the Big Man Dram. Here's the Dram. And I will be speaking with Peyton Beall today, who has sort of two roles, either one of which would have made a worthy guest on the show. But I'll let her explain it in more detail. But she works at Kentucky Peerless, but she also is a partner in a Scotch whiskey bar in Louisville, Kentucky, which is fascinating in its own right, in the boldness of the whole thing. So I'm going to bring her in, if you don't mind, and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I'm thrilled to be here. This is my first podcast, so I'm excited.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, it's funny because we're sort of throwing you into the deep end in that it's a live one. You know, it's not like we can stop and start.
Well, let's just do it. Let's just go dive right in. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So, we met when I was in Kentucky last year, and I was, what I had done, I don't know if I told you this when I met you, but what I had done before I went to Kentucky is I reached out to a few of my whiskey friends. I said, I'm going to be in Kentucky. I'm going to be there for 5 days. Tell me where to go. Because I didn't want to do what like a Chamber of Commerce would tell me. I didn't want to do what a tourist board would tell me. I wanted to do what other like whiskey nerds would tell me. And I've been to Louisville before for film festival, but I'd never done like a deep dive into whiskey before. And so, a lot of the people, 3 or 4 people that were recommending places, a lot of people said, hey, you got to go to Kentucky Peerless. So that was on the list right away. So
yeah, we hear that a lot at Kentucky Peerless, and you kind of alluded to it in the intro. I have worked there in some capacity for 6 years now. Started working there right after I moved to Kentucky. Moved to Kentucky from Pensacola, Florida. Quite a change. And then I started out as a part-time tour guide. I have a loud mouth, so I was on a tour and just kind of piped up and asked if they were hiring, and kept calling until I think they just hired me, so I would quit calling them, and started out giving tours and tastings in the front of house. And that kind of grew into managing the front of house and working as a marketing associate. For those of you listening who don't know a ton about Kentucky Peerless, it's a very small distillery run by the Taylor family, father and son, Corky and Carson Taylor. And so just kind of right place, right time. People left, expansion was happening. They needed people in new roles. So I was able to kind of move up the chain a little bit and work in marketing and helping with offsite events and, expanding our visibility in the market, which has gone really well over recent years as compared to when I first started there, for sure. And then now I am helping run a whiskey bar here in Louisville, Kentucky. We're also a classic cocktail lounge, but yes, we specialize in Scotch whiskey, and it's working quite well. Yeah, it was a bold move, but working where I work and talking to people every single day, both local and traveling tourists, I knew there was a market for looking at whiskey through more of a global lens in this city. And I knew there was a hunger for it. And so far, over the past 3 months, we've been proven right. So it's been really, really nice to see. I also have my dram of whiskey here as well. I'm sipping on some Peerless as we're talking. So, yeah.
I'd love for you to tell people, I know what you're drinking, but because I'm having a single barrel that I got at the distillery, which is called Citrus Bundt Cake, which is a great name and great description of the whiskey itself. But yours is really pretty far out there. So
yeah, so we do have at Kentucky Peerless, we do a couple of whiskeys that are what you call finished off in a barrel that contained a different type of liqueur or spirit. We do have a rum finished bourbon, but I am sipping our absinthe finished rye. So you can see that there. So what this is our rye whiskey that sat in the barrel for at least 4 years and then was transferred into an empty barrel that once held absinthe. It doesn't take very long. Most finished whiskeys, I feel like, spend, the better part of a year at least in a barrel to take on some of that character of the spirit that was in that barrel. With this absinthe barrel, it only takes about 4 to 6 weeks. Any longer, and the absinthe really just takes over. And even with just the 4 to 6 week mark, it is you have to like absinthe. It is a very polarizing expression. People generally either love it or hate it, but I think it tastes sort of like a Sazerac in a bottle. Put it over ice, a little twist of lemon, and you've pretty much got yourself a Sazerac in a bottle, which is one of my favorite cocktails. So that's why I love it so much.
When you told me about it yesterday, I immediately thought to myself that I bet you that would be popular in like Finland or in like Scandinavia, just because I know rye is popular there, and I feel like some of the absinthe flavors are really popular.
But people generally, even if they don't love
Oh, I lost you.
Of it, they like how just not the norm, because you see a lot of cognac finished whiskeys, you see a lot of rum barrel finished whiskeys, that sort of thing. But to my knowledge, I don't know of another whiskey finished in an absinthe barrel other than this one. And we release this one once a year. I think this bottle is from our 4th release. So we should be coming up on another release here soon. If you follow the distillery on social, Kentucky Peerless, their social media, you'll get a heads up as to when that'll be released. So.
There you go. Perfect opportunity to throw that up there. Then.
Yeah.
I know that's not the social, it's just the website, but still, I'm sure that will connect people.
It'll link you to everything: Instagram, Facebook. Proof wise, this one's sitting at 113.6. And of course, follows all the other guidelines that we follow: the sweet matching, the low barrel entry proof, all of that. And then the expression that you're having, the citrus bundt cake. If people aren't familiar with Kentucky Peerless, our single barrels that we offer in-house, chosen by our master distiller, Caleb Kilburn, those are all named by our barrel selection panel and tasting panel. So when you hear something like citrus bundt cake and you think, oh gosh, they're flavoring their whiskey, what's going on down there? That's not what's happening. It's those names are based on the tasting notes that he writes. We'll take the top, 3 or 4 most prominent notes and then try to think of a clever name that reflects the essence of what the barrel did to that particular whiskey that was inside it.
Well, it's funny. I was just watching a panel last week about Irish whiskey, and they were talking about certain flavor notes that they were getting from a rye that had it was from a mash bill, an old Irish whiskey mash bill, and they were constantly getting notes of that sort of white icing that would go on like a bundt cake, and and that they're like, there's nothing even remotely similar to that going into this. It's just we're getting it out of it, and I get that from this too, for sure.
Lots of that light, delicate, sweet, sugary note. Peerless, for me, one of the most common thematic flavor notes or flavor profiles that I get off of our whiskey is always a lot of baking spice. Mm-hmm. So that probably comes across pretty prominently in that barrel as well. One of the reasons that baking spice is so consistently a note that we get, we have all of our barrels toasted at Kelvin cooperage before the charring process takes place. And that's the entire barrel, both the body and both heads are toasted to a medium toast level. And for anybody out there that's not familiar with what toasting does to a barrel, it's kind of like barbecuing low and slow, right? Charring is really fast. It's like flash freezing something. You do it really quick. But when you toast the barrel slowly over about 30 minutes over a low heat, it sort of coaxes all of the natural sugars or cellulose that's in that wood, in those staves, up to the surface, draws them up. And then the charring kind of locks those sugars in place. So when you put your whiskey into the barrel that's been toasted before it's been charred, it's immediately having a lot of, good interaction with those sugary notes, and a lot of baking spice will come across as a result of it.
Well, in general terms, I knew that, but you did a very good job of explaining that I think makes more sense than a lot of the explanations I've heard. That's great.
Yeah.
I was just taking a class, an online class on toasting and charring, because that's the kind of stuff I do in my free time. And it was really interesting, but it was very dense. A lot of the sort of biochemistry of the wood and stuff. But that was great.
Barrels. I think barrels are my favorite part of talking to people about whiskey, because that's the point where it sort of becomes an art form. And the scientific stuff, as far as, mashing and distillation goes and fermentation, I can get a good grasp on it, and I can repeat it back to you sort of like a parrot, but I'm kind of a science dunce. So once it hits the barrel and that artistic flair starts taking over, and you can really get the influence of Mother Nature on the whiskey, that's when I really sort of fell in love with the industry and kind of what it's all about. It's not just about making booze. It's really about crafting a spirit. And I love that it's science, and it's like science meets art. And you can't have one without the other. You've got to have a great foundation with your, the way you cook, the way you ferment, the way you distill. But it doesn't end there. You really have to make sure you're sourcing great barrels. You're taking time to, taste from barrels and not rushing things, and really letting Mother Nature have her way with that whiskey.
What's interesting, what I always think of, I always compare this to filmmaking, because it's the only thing I know anything about. There's two types of like filmmakers. I mean, there's obviously millions of types, but there's two kind of categories, where there's people that come to it from storytelling first, and then the tech side of it comes later. And then there's like tech geeks that get into it, and then they figure out how to tell a story, but they know everything about a camera or everything about post-production. And I always think of that with whiskey, that there's people that are like hands-on craftspeople that may not understand or have any experience or exposure to the sort of biochemistry of it, but they learn that and they know how to work within it. And then there's like the people with degrees in biochemistry who have to go actually learn the hands-on of it all, and sort of.
It's funny. Our master distiller at Peerless, Caleb, he is very much a whiz kid when it comes to all of the chemistry. I mean, that's what he has a degree in that. He can write a book about how to build a still and distillation and fermentation and tell you about all that. But I have to, when I used to have the role at Peerless of hiring new staff members to give tours and lead tastings there, I had to warn them to stay away from Caleb at first, because if I turned Caleb loose on them and he started talking, it would just be so far over anybody else's head that he would almost scare them off. So I would have to say, just give them a month, let them settle in, let them get their feet underneath them, and then you can talk to them about the ins and outs of distillation. So it's kind of funny. I almost had to like insulate them from being scared off, because it can be a little intimidating, and I think it's intimidating to a lot of people. But yeah, it's just kind of funny to watch people's eyes glaze over while they're talking to him.
Well, I always try to seem like I'm keeping up when I'm not talking with him specifically, but I always try, even when I'm in over my head, I always just nod politely. Make notes to research later.
Same. Yeah.
We have a question from our good friend Mark Pruitt, who said, "What do you think of the potential for barrels made from materials outside of oak?"
Oh, I love it. I love all experimentation. I'm not one of those people that takes this. I mean, it needs to be serious to a certain degree. But I'm all for innovation and trying new things. And I mean, that's probably how we got to the point that we're at now, right? I mean, someone tried something new at some point. I do love the heritage and the history behind bourbon itself. So I do like that we have, the rules protecting the spirit within this, this sort of bourbon format. But the idea of putting whiskey into a barrel made from, I don't know, could you make a barrel from cypress or something? I'm thinking with my Southerner brain, what kind of trees do we see? Lots of pine trees, cypress trees, different wood. I think it would be fun to see what would happen.
Well, in Ireland, there's no limitations. It just has to be wood. And so I've been in the Waterford distillery. They have a warehouse where they have
I met Ned.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, he came into Kentucky Peerless years and years ago. I don't know if he was here sourcing barrels at Kelvin Cooperage and they sent him over to see us, but I got to take him around the distillery. He's such a nice guy. I'm hoping that I'll make it over to Waterford one day and return the favor.
It's a cool distillery. It's a cool space because it's such a quaint little Irish town on the river, and then there's this giant Death Star in the middle of it. That they didn't build. Guinness built it. They bought it. Guinness was closing it down as a brewery, and they turned it into a distillery. But
wow. I don't.
So they have a warehouse with 8 different the number could be different. I haven't been there in a year, but they had 8 different casks, each in different wood, not oak, and they had chestnut and acacia, and a type of like a rare type of oak and cherry. And then I don't remember what the other ones were. And they might have been variations of other ones. There might have been like 2 different cherries, for example.
Right.
But I do know that the one thing they said with the chestnut, and there was a chestnut cask finished tealing. And they said that the problem with chestnut, the whiskey's good. The wood isn't watertight or liquid tight at all. And they said they constantly were having to repair and maintain the casks. And they coated the outside of the cask with like creosote just to get it to seal. I think it was creosote, but it smelled, and it was basically black tar on the outside of the cask, not in the whiskey, obviously, but still, it was just a giant. It said you had to wear gloves just to handle the cask at all times. So I think it was kind of a pain. It made but the whiskey was tasty.
Yeah, I would think that would be some of the challenges you would face. I mean, oak is such a hard, sturdy wood that it makes such a great barrel, and that's probably why it was used to begin with. But still, I'd love to taste some of that. Especially the whiskey and the cherry wood. I'd be interested to see what that did to it.
I didn't get to taste that, and I have no idea what acacia would even taste like. So I only tasted the chestnut, but it was good.
I have no idea either.
It wasn't so different. You know what I mean? It wasn't a completely different drink. It was just a different tasting flavor notes. One of the things that I'm interested in is, and this will eventually, this brings up the topic of your other business is, but I'm always amazed. I've done a fair amount of whiskey traveling at this point. I've been in, 4 major whiskey countries. I've been in Canada, but I haven't been there in a whiskey context necessarily. You know what I mean? I didn't have a lot of Canadian whiskey when I was there. I had some, but not much. But I've been in the States, and I've been in Australia, and I've been in Ireland, and I've been in Scotland, right? And I'm amazed. It's not so much Australia because there's not enough of an industry there yet. But the other 3, like the big 3, Ireland, Scotland, and the US, the whiskey communities are so cloistered from one another. It's amazing. And it's not like a negative thing. It's not like we hate that. It's like we just don't drink that, And I had that experience in Ireland, and I was in Northern Ireland. I could, on a clear day, you could see Scotland from there. And every bar you go into was nothing but Irish whiskey. And then like someone just asked me, one of the Scottish guys just asked me the other day to tell me a little bit about what I thought was interesting in Kentucky at the moment. And then because they're basically his knowledge of whiskey, of American whiskey, began and ended with wild turkey. And so I was like, well, that's not even the tip of the iceberg. That's just like a piece of snow on the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and how that may or may not have led to you doing what you and your partners have created.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, opening our bar is called Tartan House. So big nod to tartan plaids that all the Scottish clans have, and we for me, it's more, I love Scotland. I love being there. And I love the people within the Scotch whiskey industry. But here in Kentucky, working at Kentucky Peerless, a lot of my coworkers didn't really know much about, like you said, they don't know much about Irish whiskey. They don't know much about Scotch whiskey. Even Caleb, our master distiller, he was kind enough to let me sit in and help him judge the single malt category for one of the competitions that had asked him to judge. He said, I just assumed I'd be judging bourbon or American whiskey. And when I got the file and it said single malt whiskey, I knew I was in trouble and needed somebody to come in and help me. So that was really fun. But he had a great time, and he was like, I have never been exposed to it enough to appreciate it. And so slowly I've started talking to more and more people about, whiskey in terms of from a global market. And I can't really explain to you why people don't step out of their comfort zone here more. They just don't seem to. But we've had a really, really good response. I mean, we even have some Indian single malts on our back bar. We've got tons of Irish single malts. We've got Scotch, single malt Scotch whiskey. We've got Japanese whiskey on the back bar. And every Wednesday here is World Whiskey Wednesday. So if you come in and you drink anything other than American whiskey, you get, a discount on your dram. And it's been really fun. I mean, it's also putting people at ease to know that they can come in and, kind of a no risk policy on trying something new that they may or may not know about. And our staff can talk to them about it. But you're right. It's kind of odd. I've been in that same spot in Northern Ireland. I took the ferry over to Islay from Northern Ireland. And you're right. It was a marked difference between what I saw in the bars, there in Northern Ireland versus Scotland. Hopefully we're all, everything's growing at at least in the United States, the whiskey industry is growing at such a rapid pace. I feel like that you are seeing more experimentation. You are seeing more, open-mindedness as far as, even the questions that are being asked. What do you think about trying different? And so I think we're getting there, but it's going to take, not to toot our own horn, but it's going to take places like Tartan House opening up and really opening the eyes and opening people's minds to other whiskeys. It's fun though. It's fun to see people's minds sort of being blown about, hey, globally, Indian whiskey sells more, in terms of sales, it's the highest selling whiskey in the world. And people are like, what? I didn't even know that they made whiskey in India. So it's been really fun.
And at the end of the day, it's like, well, you're just trying a new thing. It's, you're not, it's not like you're choosing this over something else. It's, it's in addition to,
right. And for a lot of people, we make the point, had it not been for Scotch whiskey, had it not been for Irish whiskey, we probably wouldn't have, the distillation methods that we have today for making bourbon whiskey. The only reason bourbon's made of corn is because corn grows well in the United States. Corn grows everywhere. Barley, not so much in the South. So, had it been the other way around, maybe American whiskey would have been predominantly made of barley. But, we can all learn things from each other, and we all kind of owe our styles and kind of the history to one another. So,
I couldn't agree more. And it's amazing to me always to learn about whiskeys the historic roots of whiskeys in any part of the world are always tied back to a practicality, not a whim. It wasn't like, well, this doesn't grow well here, but let's try this. It's more like, this is what we have. Mm-hmm. Let's do this.
Yeah. Same way with, so to your point, everybody always, or not everybody, I don't want to say everybody or always, but a common question I would get giving tours at Peerless when we would start talking about barrels is why do you char the barrels? What's the reasoning behind charring the barrels? And I would say, well, if you want a really good story, people will say that, Evan Williams was a preacher in Kentucky, and one day he was standing by a barrel and God sent down a lightning bolt and the barrel caught on fire, and then he put his whiskey in it and it was delicious. I personally think somebody just reused a barrel that had something unsavory in it, like fish. And so to make it not be disgusting, they burned the inside, put some whiskey in it, and ended up liking the result. So I know that doesn't make for as, a theatrical of a story, but that's probably more to the truth.
Yeah. I mean, it's what's it called? I'm forgetting the name. It's a tasting thing. It's basically with meat. Why do we cook meat? Is it the Meunier effect? Meunier?
That sounds right.
Anyway, yeah, no, it's funny to me because it's Gordon and MacPhail in Scotland. When we were filming there, they told us that they have records of going back of all the things that they would use to import 150 years ago in barrels into Scotland from other places. And he said that's really where sherry casks came from, because we would import sherry in barrels, bottle it, and then we had a cask. And so that's the idea of like, oh, this was good. But he said they also have records of fish casks, and one contained, I think, screws. And he said both of those had, decided don't try this again. Fish and screws are not good. Sherry good, bourbon good. Fish and screws not good.
Not so much. Yeah.
We have another question from Mark, and then a follow-up about that. With your experience at Tartan House, is the Dram alive and well? Are cocktails making a comeback? Curious to know if there's an even split or if it leans in any direction.
I would definitely say our business skews heavily cocktail, but the response and the people that we do see having drams, I would say it's probably 60-40. So it's not as much as we thought. We anticipated maybe that we would be, a little more cocktail heavy, but we've kind of seen more than we thought, more people than we thought. And the levels of our Scotch whiskey bottles and other global whiskeys on the back bar are, they fell far faster than we thought that they would. And a lot of the bottles we've had to reorder already, which is really nice because we've only been open about 3 months. So we've had a really good response. So I would say the Dram is alive and well. The cocktails are definitely a big part of what we do. So a little bit about our cocktail program. We use liquid nitrogen to chill our glassware, which is not dry ice. Those are two different things, so nobody needs to be scared. And then, so it's a nice effect, right? The glasses kind of smoke and billow, but it's also practical. So if you're chilling a glass that has a stem on it, if you put that glass in the freezer, the entire glass is going to get cold. And when you pull it out of the freezer, the whole thing's going to start condensating. So if you use liquid nitrogen, we only fill the portion of the glass, obviously, where your drink is going to be. And then it will sit in there for, maybe 20 seconds or so, and then it gets poured out. So the stem and the bottom of the glass are still room temperature, which is nice. It also saves us space because then we don't have to have a separate freezer just for glassware to be chilled. The other thing we do, we have our own in-house ice program. So ice is very, very important when you're talking about making cocktails. The better quality your ice is, because your ice is going to dilute while you're drinking your cocktail, right? That's even true when you're talking about whiskey. The water that you drop into your whiskey, you want it to be, good quality water. Same here. So we are doing our own ice in-house. We have a bandsaw in the back, like butchers use, that we cut down all of our ice blocks Even the ice that we use to shake and stir cocktails is made here in-house. So you know that the ice that's going into your cocktail is going to be really good quality. And to my knowledge, there's not another bar in town that's doing that. They will buy it from, a source that will deliver it to them. But my partner, Jeff, is doing it all in-house. So those are the things that we're doing. And we really focus on classic cocktails. We have a great penicillin on our menu. It was just voted the third best cocktail in the city, which was nice. We have a Rob Roy on our cocktail menu. We have several Scotch-based cocktails, which people are really, really, really loving. So it's been nice to see. But that's kind of a little bit about our cocktail program, as well as, talking about the whiskey side of things.
Well, I definitely feel like our friend Russell, who's a regular viewer here, he said seems like a lot more talk about whiskey cocktails these days, and I couldn't agree more. And I've seen it in a lot of Scotch brands. I think that's they've identified that's where they're going to grow, and it's definitely been interesting to sort of try cocktails being made with better whiskeys than you could sort of mask a mediocre whiskey behind a couple of cocktails, but to sort of lean into the whiskey side of it is kind of interesting and potentially delicious.
Yeah, and we use some pretty nice expressions for our cocktails. For our penicillin, we're using, for example, Great King Street, the Compass Box blended Scotch whiskey. It has a really nice spice note to it, which works well with the fresh ginger syrup that we make here in house. And then we spritz the top with Ardbeg 10-year, which is what gives it that nice peaty note when you put it to your nose and take a sip. But yeah, I mean, I think the whiskey that you use in your cocktail is just as important as the whiskey that you're going to sip on. So we try to use ones that we wouldn't mind sipping on neat, not just hiding the whiskey behind the ingredients.
Let me ask you a question about people that are trying drams of single malt Scotch. Do you do flights? Like, can people try different to sort of cast a wide net of whiskeys, of new ones?
So if people come in and that's what they want to do, we're happy to curate a flight for them. That's kind of sort of the next phase of our menu rollout because when we first opened, initial inventory is one of the biggest costs that you face when you open a bar, especially a bar, with a whiskey, big whiskey presence. So we knew we wanted that library to grow. So we didn't want to spend a whole lot of time and effort on making big, fancy flight lists, menus, because we knew that we were going to have spirits that we wanted to add to it, whiskeys that we wanted to add to it. So that's kind of the next step. But yes, we're going to have flights that are, geared towards maybe the bourbon drinker that wants to try single malt Scotch for the first time, ones that they would typically like. But I do get a lot of people coming in asking, I'm typically a bourbon drinker. Can you point me in the direction of a single malt Scotch that you think I would enjoy? And of course, I'm going to ask them more questions because bourbon casts a wide net. So, if they say they like XYZ, I may say, you're going to love this Balvenie Double Wood. That's one of the ones that I give bourbon drinkers, and they're like, wow. Because I don't know if this happens in every city, but for whatever reason, here in Louisville, most people who say that they've tried Scotch and don't like it have someone poured them Lefroy 10-year as their very first dram of single malt Scotch. And I don't know why. I personally love Lefroy 10-year, but I don't know that I would have loved it if it was my very first sip of Scotch whiskey. So, a lot of people here think that all whiskey tastes like that. All whiskey tastes smoky and heavily peated, which we all know couldn't be further from the truth. But it's been really fun to see people's minds kind of blown by, you mean this scotch tastes like this? I'm like, well, it can. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw a stat the other day that said 11% of the whiskey made in Scotland is peated. But yet the vibe outside of Scotland is that it all is. Yeah.
You're right. That's what people, and if you go to, a lot of the bars in the city, you will see a bottle of Lafroig sitting on the shelf. Usually a bottle of Lafroig and maybe 3 others, and that's about it. But we currently have just over, I think, 50 different single malts on our back bar. So, and
nice.
Growing every week. So
maybe I told you this when I met you. I'm too addle-brained to remember, but when we were interviewing Charlie McLean, he gave us this amazing intro to Scotch whiskey evening. And we made a little video about it that I've shared a couple of times. I'll put it in our Facebook group again, but you could do it. You could do it at your bar. Because what he said is you get 5 friends, because there's 5 whiskey regions in Scotland. I know some would argue 6, but according to the Scotch Whisky Association, it's 5.
Right.
Because Highlands and Islands is 1. But that might change, but not now. So you get 5 friends. And you have to go to a bar that's going to have a big enough selection that you can get 1 whiskey from each of the 5 regions. But then you ask the bartender to give everybody a fifth of a dram. So you're going to have 25 glasses worth, and then everyone tastes it. Then you vote. And whatever region wins, the next round you buy 5 whiskeys from that region. And then you do the same again.
I love that.
And
no, I don't think you told me that.
I loved it. I thought it was like, that would be such a fun evening. I mean, you'd have to go on a Monday or Tuesday, or a bartender's not going to love pouring you 25.
Right.
But if you have a bartender that's got a little bit of time, it's such a great way to sort of, dig down deeper instead of wider.
Yeah. We have one of our head bartenders, Aaron Plevin. He's really, really gotten into kind of the nerdy side of doing a lot of research on different brands and different regions and different expressions. So he would actually love that. So if anybody listening lives here in Louisville, come in on a Monday or Tuesday and see Aaron, and I'm sure he would love to do that for you, or myself if I'm here. Yeah.
I'll send you the little video. We made a little 2-minute video explaining.
Please do. I'll share it with the staff and just tell them, hey, keep an eye out, because you might see this coming in.
It just seemed, I haven't done it, but I didn't, by the time I learned that idea, I didn't really need to do it, but it would be such a fun way of, I think it would work in France with wines or something. You know what I mean? You could do it any country that's going to have a huge variety of different drinks in them.
Heck yeah. No, I love that. Sounds fun.
I have a question for you. So the other day, yesterday, I was actually watching Roy Duff's live Aquavitae YouTube podcast he does every Thursday, and someone was talking to him, and they were saying about what is a great whiskey to introduce a committed bourbon drinker into Scotch whiskey. And then the person and a bunch of people in the chat started making suggestions, but he had a counter point that I never heard before. I thought was interesting. He said a lot of people always pick virgin oak Scotch because the virgin oak is going to best emulate the oak that bourbon is held in. It's going to have that big vanilla sweetness and stuff.
Right.
And so there's Deanston virgin oak, and then Romic organic, and Balvenie sweet toast of American oak.
Mm-hmm.
But what he said was, I don't think that works as well as people think it would work, because what you're going to do is you're going to muddy the waters. So they're going to give someone flavors that they're used to mixed with flavors they're not used to. And he said, I kind of think that the best way to go is and he said, I'm not talking about peat. I understand that is, you got to dip your toe in that water. But he said, just find a whiskey that stylistically is so far different from Scotch or from bourbon, and just go there and then sort of work your way back towards the middle. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because you're exposed to both. But, because I was always doing the first thing.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that being a good point to make. And maybe if you're going that route, point somebody to something that's like a super rich sherry bomb, because that's not a note that we really see come across in bourbons unless they're finished, in a sherry cask, like Scotch whiskey is. But I don't know. I've had a lot of success again with Balvenie Doublewood. People my bourbon drinkers really, really like that one. But I've also poured them, the Glendronach 12-year, which is not only a great price point, but it's got that double sherry, PX and Oloroso finished. So it's going to have that rich sherry note. And people I will say, a lot of the bourbon drinkers really, really like high proof. So sometimes Scotch whiskey, especially single malt Scotch whiskeys that are, in the 80s or 90 proof, sometimes it's a little too, it's not quite aggressive enough for them.
Mm-hmm.
They like that burn. So we have a cask strength Aberlour on the back bar that has done really well with bourbon drinkers that say that they like something higher proof, which a lot of them do. So that's kind of a difference too between bourbon and Scotch drinkers, I think.
Is that the Aberlour Abuna?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great whiskey, and that, I could see that. I totally get what you're saying.
Yep.
Here, Mark actually said the hallmark of bourbon is that rough edge on the palate. The proper gateway may actually be cask strength single malts. Yeah, I've never contemplated it before, but
yeah. And I didn't either. I mean, this is all information I'm absorbing as I am, meeting people and talking to people and kind of introducing them to new whiskeys. So that has been kind of a theme that it's happened so often that I'm remembering that, hey, a lot of times they're going to want something a little higher proof. So that's the route we go sometimes. Yeah.
It's funny you said that about the Great King Street, because I'm a fan of that, and I think Compass Box does some amazing stuff, including some of their, more accessible whiskeys are still really punching way above their weight class.
Yeah. I see the Classic Laddie as a good starter. That's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, I think Classic Laddie, I've done that before because I'm a big fan of it, but I mean, it's because it is high ABV. It's 100 proof, 50%, and it's not peated. It's not sweet, but it has a little bit of that sort of orangey kind of citrus note, maybe, and obviously a little bit of sweetness because it's mostly ex-bourbon casks. So
yeah,
a
good one. We have that one too. Yeah.
It's funny because I when I was talking to you yesterday, I told you I always pull out 2 whiskeys when I do this, and I was drinking the Peerless, and then I was like, what else am I going to drink? And I didn't know until today. I just kind of on a whim, I decided to go. And this is a Kilchoman. This is a UK small batch, and it's 3 casks vatted together. And wait to hear these 3 casks: bourbon, ex-bourbon cask, Oloroso sherry, and Calvados cask.
Wow. Okay.
And I was quite taken with it when I was there in June. So I bought a bottle at each distillery I went, and this was my takeaway from Kilchoman.
Very nice. So another thing, now that you just brought out that bottle of Kilchoman, and I don't know why this triggered this thought, but something kind of neat that we do every month. The first day of each month, we have a new, what we call a break-even bottle. It's basically a higher end bottle that we bring on from our distributors that we sell at cost per ounce, just to kind of give people an option to have something a little bit kind of exclusive, a little bit higher end. So the first month we did a Kentucky Owl, the Mardi Gras edition. It was a rye whiskey. And it took almost the entire month to sell through. But the second month we did the Compass Box Velicor bottle. I don't know if you've had that one.
I know it, but I've not had it. No.
Yeah. So we didn't know, because just second month open, how that one would do, and it sold out almost immediately. I mean, it didn't even stay around 2 weeks. So that was really cool to see that, our first time out the door, we were like, let's play it safe. Let's do something American. And it took almost the whole month to sell through. And then the second month we're like, nope, we're going for it. We're going to put a Scotch out there. And that one was very well received. This month we did a Whistle Pig 18-year-old that has some barley and a good amount of barley in the mash bill. And it's been well received. But if anybody out there listening is, again, based in Louisville or is going to be in Louisville next month, we plan to have a Glendronach 28-year-old for our break-even bottle for the month. So
wow,
stop in and see us. Yeah.
Wow, that's a heck of a bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a coworker who's only 27. I was like, hey, you want to come in and drink some whiskey that's older than you are? She was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's getting hard at my age. I did get to drink a 75-year-old whiskey when we were at Gordon and MacPhail. That was
oh wow,
insane.
What'd you think?
Well, it was an amazing opportunity, but to be honest with you, it was kind of like drinking leather.
Yeah.
It tasted like drinking. I always say it was like I was drinking my grandfather's wallet.
Yeah.
Like it was like old leather, like old pocket leather, pipe smoke, big wood presence, a lot of wood presence.
Yeah. I had an opportunity to do that, taste some vintage whiskey with Fred Minnick at Peerless one time. When Top Chef was being filmed in Kentucky, he brought a group of people in that were doing production on the show, and he led a vintage tasting, and some of them I was just like, I mean, this is cool. The idea of it is really interesting that we're able to drink whiskeys that are, maybe from the 40s, but taste wise, just wasn't for me. And I honestly, and that kind of just speaks to what I like in a whiskey. I like stuff that you can still get some of this distillery character from and some of the grain character from. And so I top out typically at about 12 years. That's kind of my sweet spot. Anything up in the 20, right? Especially when you're talking about bourbon.
Sure. Oh yeah. Well, sure.
It's on way too much of that barrel character for my taste. But plenty of people love it, or they wouldn't pay dearly for it.
Well, it's funny though. I think sometimes distilleries kind of, I don't have one in mind, if I'm honest, but I'm saying you could get into this. It's a dangerous way of thinking where you want a bad cask because then you can keep it in longer, right? Put a bigger number on it. But it's not because it was in a great cask. It was because it was in a terrible cask that wasn't doing anything. So it didn't over oak the whiskey.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, it's you're compromising quality just to get a big number, which will, I mean, the number will pay, people will pay just blindly on the number,
Oh yeah.
But just I think maybe my favorite whiskey I've ever had was a 28-year-old. So, I mean, that's not exactly young, but it's not world record.
No, and that's not a hard and fast rule for me. It's just kind of typically what I find myself enjoying is stuff around 12 years old. Again, especially when you're talking anything American whiskey wise.
Well, it's funny. I meant to look at this. I know there's no age statement on this, but I wanted to see sometimes there's the vintages. Because Kilhoman's pretty interesting about the amount of information they make available. It can be really great, and sometimes there's more, and sometimes there's less.
I've noticed that too, yeah.
70% ex-bourbon cask, 5% Oloroso sherry, 25% Calvados. Like, that's pretty specific.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Kilhoman, we have several of their expressions, and one of our bartenders, Stephanie, she had a really good experience at the distillery there, so she's a big fan. So we've definitely brought on several of their expressions. I haven't been myself personally, but I hope to someday.
Keith Duncan said he just had a 26-year-old Glenrothes from Lady of the Glen, which was stunning.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I love high ABV Glenrotheses. If like a regular, some Glenrothes that are like 43 or 40, they're just, the mouth feels completely gone and everything. But some of those, I have a Scotch Malt Whiskey Society Glenrothes that's 58% ABV, and it's stunning. And it doesn't drink like it's as high as it is, which is dangerous.
Yeah. I find most of their expressions are the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. Most of their expressions are pretty high ABV, I feel like.
Yeah. I can't think of any that they have that aren't. I mean, maybe some of the really old ones because it'll be dropping, but
we're
I don't have
hoping
any of those really old ones. So.
Yeah, we're hoping to bring some of those on here at Tartan House. We're just trying to figure out the logistics of. Nobody else in Kentucky has brought it in yet, so they don't have a distributor here. So that's kind of creating some challenges. But we're looking into ways to get around it. We even looked into maybe starting our own distribution company, but I don't think that's going to work. But.
Well, I think that, what do they call them here in the U.S.? Embassy bars, right? Is that what they think they call them? I think an embassy bar for the SMWS in Kentucky would be an amazing, because I live, the California Embassy Bar is the Tam O'Shanter, which I can walk to from here. And it's awesome because there's 75 different SMWS bottles there. Then they bring in once a month, they bring in the new out turns. And then a couple times a year, you can go and then you get to vote on what will become the later out turn. And you can even submit name suggestions. I've never had a name suggestion chosen, but you can do it.
Yeah, we're working on it. We actually had a meeting with them, with someone that works with them, and hopefully sometime within the first year that we're open, I hope that we'll be able to bring them on and have a good representation from the society on the back bar. That's what I'm hoping anyway. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, they do good stuff, and I know they've been doing a lot more American whiskey releases as well. So I'm sure they're trying to grow relationships in Kentucky.
Yeah, they've definitely had a few here lately. They were probably not. Have you had any of their American bottlings?
I don't own any, but I've tasted stuff. And I was just going to ask you, do you know if they've done any Peerless? I don't think they have.
I'm not sure. No.
The only reason I ask is because on our film's website, we have a page called Decoding the SMWS, which is just a chart to decode all the. And I would have noticed. I've gone through it loads of times, and I would have noticed if there was a distillery that I knew people at, that was on there, and it wasn't on there. Now that being said, I think ours, they're constantly updating it, and I think ours is a bit out of date.
Gotcha.
Here you go. There you go. Anyone that wants to see it, that's it. That's the.
All of our staff is kind of obsessed with the SMWS. So anytime anyone has a birthday, that's what everyone gets, is a bottle from the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society.
It's a great way to give a gift where you can almost be certain that they've not had it, because everything is only there for, once and done.
And I'm pretty sure around the holidays, they offer something where if you gift someone a membership, you yourself get like a $50 gift card, or you get $50 to use towards a purchase, which is kind of perfect.
Yeah, I use my membership all the time. And when I go to Scotland, I can go to the members' rooms too and eat.
Yeah. I've been to the Queen Street
in Edinburgh.
And I've been to the one in London as well. Back in March.
I've not been to the one in London, but I've been to the Leith Vaults, the original one outside of Edinburgh.
Nice.
And I've been to the Glasgow one that's new.
The one in London is much smaller than the one in Edinburgh, but I still had a really good time, and the staff was really friendly and helpful. We had a good afternoon.
I can tell you something funny. We're making a film, a kind of a companion film to the first one about independent bottling. And we're one of the places that we're featuring is the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. And I wrote to them last week and I said, hey, we're doing a little thing about the history of the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. And I would love a bottle. I'd love a photo or film footage of bottle 1.1, the very first thing you released, which is a Glenfarclas in the 80s. And they said, we don't know if we have any, but if we do, we'll get it to you. And then I wrote back, and I was afraid they wouldn't know I was kidding. But I said, if you don't have one, just send me a bottle and I'll take a picture of it. And then I'll send you the picture and you can keep the picture and I'll keep the bottle. But they knew I was kidding. Fortunately, they wrote back, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, that's cool. I'm also fascinated with independent bottling. The last time I was in Scotland was April of 2022, and they were just coming out of COVID restrictions at that time, and I had hoped to make it to Gordon and MacPhail, but they weren't open that day, which I was kind of bummed out about. But glass half full, we were able to go to the society tasting room in Edinburgh. So that was nice. And I plan to be back, so I'll make it.
Cool. Yeah, well, I know Gordon and MacPhail's kind of been half closed to the public because they're redoing their visitor center and everything. And so a friend of mine who has been on this show, actually, he was Russell does tastings and stuff for them, and he's been doing it out of a temporary space in the meantime because they're completely rebuilding and in the original building, but they're just redoing it. So
nice. And then isn't Compass Box opening a distillery?
Well, what they've announced was Compass Box is opening a brand home.
Okay.
And it might just be a visitor center. I don't know if it's going to be a distillery or not. But when I wrote to them and asked them about that, they were like, yeah, that kind of got out to the press before we were ready to talk about it. So.
Well, it happens. It happens.
Russell Patton. Yes, I have not been to. I was there in June filming at the Leith Falls. We were there for our tour, and then we were filming there, and it was kind of in the middle of being redone. Now I know it's done. I've seen photos and stuff, but I haven't been back to Scotland since June. So
nice.
Sorry, you were saying something. I don't want to.
No, I was just gonna say Compass Box is always so interesting to me because it's an American that started that brand. So it's just kind of always been fascinating. I kind of follow them a little bit here and there.
They're really interesting. They're very, very interesting. And I just found out that I don't know. I honestly don't know if it's 100%, and it probably is not. I'm almost certain it isn't. But a huge amount of their spirit, they buy spirit from Craig Ellicky, from Dewar's, and then so they're not just an independent bottler where each thing is from a different source. They actually have a deal with Craig Ellicky to get the new make, and then they age everything themselves. And so it's just I'm intrigued by independent bottlers who do business in a different way. Like the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society is kind of like the old Columbia Record and Tape Club.
Yeah. 13 records, 13 CDs for a penny.
Yeah, they should do a thing where if you don't send the card back every month, you're getting that bottle of whiskey.
Yeah, they should.
If you don't send that card back, you're getting Air Supply's greatest hits, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I used to get in so much trouble with Columbia House. Yeah.
Well, that's funny because my story is my parents belonged, and they never would remember to send the card back. So each month they'd get this, record or tape in the mail, and they didn't want it, but they'd give it to me. So as a little kid, I started to develop a really weird taste in music. Like, it was just age inappropriate for like an 8-year-old. I was like getting like Steely Dan's greatest hits and stuff. And
I remember my dad wouldn't let me. I was probably like 12. I wanted to order a Doors CD, and he wouldn't let me. And I just stormed off to my room and slammed the door. It's like I don't think that's the best idea, but yeah.
My daughter overheard me tell a story that when I was 10, maybe I loved The Who, and I bought a Who t-shirt. I saved up money and I bought a Who t-shirt online. And when it came, it said, Schlitz presents The Who Rocks America. And my mom said, you're not wearing a beer t-shirt. I was like, it's not a beer t-shirt. It's a rock and roll t-shirt. She said, you're not wearing a beer t-shirt to school. So I took the t-shirt and I crumpled it up in a ball and I threw it out of my bedroom window into the neighbor's bushes. Then I left for school and I came back and got it. And then I changed at school.
Oh, yeah.
My daughter heard me tell that story, and so I just bought on the internet like 2 weeks ago. I bought that exact T-shirt. I found it and bought the same T-shirt.
Well, hopefully, when she wants to do something similar, you can remember being a younger age. Look at this, 1,500 CDs. Thanks, Columbia. Yeah. Remember the thing that would hook to your visor and you'd have like all your CDs in the car? Yeah. 6-disc changer in the glove compartment.
Do you know it's I don't know if you know who Keith Morris is. the original lead singer of Black Flag before Henry Rollins. He's the lead singer of the Circle Jerks. He's like a punk legend, and he's also my next door neighbor here in Los Angeles.
Nice.
And about a year ago, he knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and he said, "Here, this is for your son." My son is 11 at the time, and it's one of those old CD binders with like 300 CDs. He's like, "This is my CD collection. I don't listen to them anymore, but I think your son should build a foundation for his rock and roll knowledge." And he gave my son like this incredible, and my son doesn't appreciate it. Like he does, but he doesn't appreciate it enough. Like I appreciate it more than he does. Like I'm jealous of him.
Because he has no idea. Anyone that age has no idea how much money that costs to build a collection of CDs. Like the idea of spending $20 for a CD where maybe you want only 2 songs off of the whole album is just a foreign concept anymore. Yeah,
but it's funny because I bought my son a Discman, which they still make. Like, here, you're going to play these CDs and you're going to listen to them in order and you're going to learn. And then my daughter, within a week, broke the disc player. She dropped it, and they're very fragile,
Yeah.
So,
I'm always like weirded. I get really weirded out when you're looking at booking a hotel or something, and one of the amenities is DVD player. I'm like, who's traveling with DVDs? Who even has a DVD player anymore?
We just literally in the last month we made Blu-rays for the movie because we were starting to get so many requests. We were like, all right, fine, we'll make them. And I think we sold a bunch already.
I guess those are the people watching DVDs in the hotel rooms.
Well, our Keith Duncan, who's one of the administrators of our Facebook group, is a friend of the film, friend of mine, and he lives right by the Leith Vaults of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society in Scotland. He actually is handling our deep Blu-ray shipping in the UK, but he also just wrote this. He said the SMWS are starting a monthly subscription, 3 drams for £45, includes a membership to access bottle purchases. I did not. I wonder if they're doing that in the U.S. or not. I could imagine that would be difficult in the U.S. because they mail order. There's only so many states that can do shipping.
Yeah.
I'm already a member, so it wouldn't help me, but it's still a cool idea.
Same. I actually got was fortunate enough to get to tour the people around Peerless from Scotch Malt. Everybody cool that I know is because I work at Kentucky Peerless and got to tour them around the distillery. But the Scotch Malt Whisky Society folks came in, and anytime someone comes in that has a connection to the Scotch whiskey industry, everybody immediately would ask me if I would want to, take them around because they know how much, kind of how passionate I am about that spirit. And so I got to take them around, and they gave me a membership that month, and then it's renewed every year for free. So
oh, wow.
Yeah, feel pretty lucky.
I mentioned Roy Duff, the YouTuber Aquavite, earlier. I went to Glasgow last year, and Roy and I had dinner together at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society members room, and we met outside. We walked in, and he went to give the card to get us in. And I said, "Can I use my card? Because I don't have members rooms in LA, and I've never gotten to use my card." So we were there officially on my dime.
Nice.
But it was literally just a person looking at the card. It meant nothing except it was just the symbolism of getting to use my card finally.
Yeah. I don't even think I brought my card the 2 times I've gone to the members rooms. I think I've just had to sign into a guest book with my number. I had to use it to make the reservation. So I guess they had it on file, whatever. So.
I thought, I'm looking here in my desk drawer. I thought I had my members card here, but I think it's in my wallet. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter. Everyone knows what they look like. I have a tendency to pull out exciting props that are like, really random. Because I don't have anything else other than a couple of whiskey bottles on my desk and a lot of hard drives.
Yeah. Kind of same.
Yeah. Well, we've as I do every week, I sky past the hour mark and don't even notice it because I'm enjoying talking to people. I always pick people to be on here who I've already had an experience enjoying talking with. So that
this has been great. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening to me ramble on and on.
People a lot of times people tune into this later too. This will stay on YouTube and it'll stay on our film's Facebook group and the Facebook page. So, it has a life beyond this. I'm actually thinking about starting to take the audio and put it up as a podcast so people can listen in their cars. I know I don't want to deprive people of getting to look at my beautiful face, but sometimes people the audio version might be more helpful.
Hey, you got to expand. Keep it going.
Yeah.
This has been fun. I was a little nervous, but I knew that I can talk to a brick wall, so I can talk and talk and talk. So I've had fun.
Well, I remember when I met you, just having very good conversations immediately, and then we all had dinner that night and stuff. So that I wasn't worried about that in the least. And so just to wrap this up, though, one thing I didn't get around to talking about at all is, as I think people who watch this know, we are very much in the process of developing a series of Water of Life films. And one of the ones we're looking at doing next is American whiskey. That's why I was on a fact-finding mission in Kentucky. That's why I've gotten to know Peerless. That's why I've gotten to know a couple of other distilleries there that I just, for one reason or another, I always say it can't just be, I'm a filmmaker. It can't just be, I love the whiskey. It has to be, I love the whiskey and I like the story. Because I got to tell an interesting story, and there could be a great whiskey with just no story behind it at all.
Yeah.
So I'll be coming back.
Good. And Peerless, for everybody that's listening, Peerless is a great, especially if you're going to be in Louisville and you may not have time. There's so many great distilleries in Kentucky to visit. But Peerless is such a small family-owned distillery, and we do everything right downtown we don't have any other location. So when you take a tour there, you get to see, our actual cooking operation, our actual fermentation area, our actual distillation area. You may see the master distiller walking around. People are rolling barrels. This is, our aging warehouse is right there on site. And what you're seeing is actually everything that we have. So that's kind of different, especially within the city limits. There's great places to go and tour, but sometimes those are kind of the urban face of a distillery that's located somewhere else. Whereas Kentucky Peerless, you're seeing our entire operation. So I think that's one thing that people really enjoy about coming there, and I think that's one reason it would make a great spot on your next film. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've already determined it would, and I just I loved being there. I love the whiskey. I like the way the whiskey's made. I like the story behind it, but I also like what's in the bottle. I mean, this stuff sticks with me.
It's good juice.
Exactly. So anyway, thank you everyone, and thank you, Peyton, for spending part of your Friday with me. I know it's later for you. It's happy hour for you now.
I was actually I'm at the bar in our private tasting room, private event space, and I'm seeing customers our guests are trickling out into the courtyard now. So I'm watching people enjoy themselves, which is really fun.
Well, my children have off school today, so I don't know what's become of them. I'm not hearing them, so I think we'll figure out. I told them they weren't allowed on the internet while I was using that to do a broadcast. So hopefully they're playing a game. Hopefully, there's like a campfire in my living room.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone. Oh, and please join me next week. We have Theron Renier, I think it's pronounced Renier, who runs and owns the Obscure in downtown LA. If you don't know it, speaking of cocktails, he's a distiller and he's part of a sort of creative collective that makes amazing cocktails. And they do an evening, a sort of a completely immersive cocktail evening where you get 3 spirits, neat, intertwined with 3 cocktails made with those 3 spirits.
Oh, wow.
So you have 6, and they're all little small pours. So you're not having 6 drinks. You're really probably having half drinks of each. But
I love that. It's a great idea.
And it's a great way of sort of saying, like, okay, this is our gin, and this is what our gin tastes like in this context. And this is our vodka. Or, well, I didn't have any vodka. It was gin and 2 different whiskeys. But in any case, it's a really interesting, really cool thing. It's very local to LA, but it's still cool. And I'm excited. So please join me next week. But thank you, Peyton. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you soon.
Guys.
Cheers.